Hello everyone. Today I am going to be reviewing the fifth studio album by Welsh singer Marina, Marina Diamandis being her full name, and of course the act that was formerly known as Marina and the Diamonds. You may be, if you're a longtime watcher of my channel, a little surprised to see a slightly different backdrop for this video. I'm trying something else out, seeing if I can figure out a new place to film. Just also to try and, keep my voice somewhat from keeping people awake at night is another reason why I'm relocating for this video. So we'll see. You might see this backdrop in future videos. I might mix it up, do some with the plain white closet backdrop and some with this. We'll see how things go. But we're talking about this new album, came out last Friday, June 11th, 2021. Marina, of course, as I said, formerly known as Marina and the Diamonds. This is her fifth studio album. It comes 2 years, pretty much exactly off of her fourth album, Love and Fear, which was like a side A and a side B type album. I have reviewed almost every Marina album on this channel, except for her debut in 2010, Family Jewels. Never got around to that one, but I have heard it. And so I will link in the description all of my reviews of the other albums of hers that I've reviewed, Electra Heart, Fruit, Love and Fear, and of course also my review of the singles from this record, Man's World and Purge The Poison, which I have also filmed separate track reviews for. This album is only 10 songs, and coming off of Love and Fear 2 years ago, we had a total of 19, 20 songs total. It was a much more, I think it was 18. I think it was 18, getting a little carried away. I think there were 9 songs on each side or something like that. I can't remember exactly. Maybe not even 9. Maybe it was 8 and 8, 16. So this is a much more scaled down project. We, had the first single last, I think it was November when Man's World came out. And so we knew a new era was coming, and this is a quicker turnaround for Marina. Usually she takes a few more years in between projects. So it somewhat makes sense that this album is a little smaller. And then when we had, the full album rollout in the last couple of months, we, had this theme coming together that I think the lead single, Man's World, was already sort of ushering in the idea. And if you look at Marina's music, even just blanket throughout her entire discography, but especially on her last record, the social justice angle is something that she is really latching onto in her music. So the macrocosmic view of society and human nature, the psychology of people. It's something that Marina has discussed as very fascinating to her. She talks a lot about, sociological subjects. She talks about cultural zeitgeists and things that really fascinate her, but also horrify her about the world around us in a lot of really interesting interviews. I find Marina one of the very, very interesting to listen to in interviews. I think she would make a wonderful podcast if she ever wanted to go down that route. She's also very well read, and she spent a lot of her downtime doing a lot of this kind of research. And so you can tell that there's real thought behind the songs that she is constructing. But at the end of the day, she's making pop music. She's making very slick electro pop music, dance infused. Some guitars do come in, so we get a little bit of that punk sensibility. Something that I think longtime fans of Marina will love about this record is that it sounds a lot more in a similar vein to her first record, The Family Jewels, which had a slightly rockier edge to it. It was a lot more the alternative moniker than some of her more recent albums, which, although might feel alternative in spirit, do not necessarily sound alternative. They're very much produced slick electropop, which is pretty mainstream, for what she's trying to play with here. This album takes us a little bit back into that direction. There's a sense that she's not trying so hard to create something that's so traditionally favored on pop radio. Songs like Purge the Poison, the title track, she's really experimenting with that again, and I like to see that. I think it's a great change up of pace. When Love and Fear, she was going heavily more into the more electronics side of things. This time she's bringing the guitars back, focusing on the piano. I think a lot of these songs could have a really fun band live sound to them. And so I think that this album is very strong for that reason. However, unfortunately, I will say that this is not my favorite Marina album. I have to be completely real with you. You know how it is. I'm a bit disappointed with this project. Part of that having to do with the fact that it is only 10 songs. And when I go through the track list, I'll break that down a little bit more. I just feel like this album leaves me wanting so much more. Even the album cover is something I kind of lament. I just don't exactly feel as though enough thought was put into the overall emphasis on the fact that this is a statement record, but I feel like a lot of the time the statement feels completely washed up in statement doesn't feel fully completed. It doesn't feel like we got the full end of the sentence in certain aspects. She does mix the personal with the political, which is something that I think a lot of great songwriters do. And I can see that the first half of this record is much more, macrocosmically facing. It's talking about women's rights. It's a lot more sort of like just it's not just Marina's own experiences. And then the latter half of this record is slower tempo. It's more minimalistic, produced with just the piano, and it's a lot more personal about failed relationships. Although there, of course, are allusions that, of course, are relatable to anyone who is navigating, the world we live in today. So I understand the way the album is kind of paired like that. However, I feel as though when she ends the album on such a personal note, when she starts so macrocosmic, I don't know if I would have liked to have maybe seen her go back through the lens of the macrocosmic at the end of the record instead of ending it on such a personal note. But at the same time, usually albums end on a personal note, so I don't know if I really should falter for that. At the end of the day, when I think about this record and I think about what I don't like about it, I have a hard time putting it to words because at the end of the day, I feel like she is kind of serving what she was meant to or what she is expected to with this project. I think longtime fans of Marina and especially, people who really like fun electro pop music by female musicians are going to really eat this up. Maybe it's just my ear is starting to wander a little bit further away from that sort of somewhat cliched electro pop bubblegum territory that I'm starting to get a little fatigued by this. But am I the only person who feels like a lot of Marina's songs start to sound the same? Like these songs all are hard to distinguish from one another, especially the non-singles we're getting on this project. Not to mention, songs off of her last album in some ways. I feel like we're starting to tread the same sort of territory, the same sort of compositions, and I'm just getting a little tired of it. And that's not to say I do not like her voice. I think her voice is so amazing. It's so soft and feminine, but powerful when it needs to be. It's got a real deepness to it that I think should shine through more on some of the ballads. I think she relies so much on her higher notes, her higher head voice for a lot of that, and it can be so slick and so beautiful to listen to. But I think we miss a little bit of that chest voice coming through that she delivers more on the more up tempo tracks. Before I get too farther into this, like I said, I do lament the album cover. I don't think it's very strong. It reminds me a lot of Björk's album covers from the 90s, which, for the 90s, you could forgive the graphic designers for doing what they did. They're not, necessarily by today's standards, the strongest compositions, I think, in terms of graphic design. And I feel like this album cover is definitely like, again, it's neon, it's colorful, it's giving you Spice Girls meets Björk meets Wonder Woman. But I've talked about how the wig looks cheap, the costuming looks cheap, the flowers. It's a very it's a very all over the place image that she is serving us. And coming off of somewhat more understated album covers, Fruit being again my favorite, with just a simple headshot, but with all the colors sort of mixing in together on her face with a very seductive glare. Really, it gives it that, vinyl worthy cover. But this album's not an album I feel like I'd want to own the vinyl for just because I wouldn't want to see that cover in, 18 by 18 or whatever the dimensions are, for a vinyl. I just wouldn't feel like it deserves that sort of spotlight. So unfortunately, that's just a personal thing. Moving into the first track, Ancient Dreams in a Modern Land. Our ancestors had to fight to survive just so we could have a chance of a life. We're not here so we can blow it all. We could bear witness to the rise and the fall. Ancient dreams in a modern land. I'm trying to get back fast as I can. Back to a time before I had form. Back to a time before I was born. I think it's interesting that she's talking about ancient times and then she's also talking about times before she was born, which could mean the early 80s, which, isn't really that ancient by big macrocosmic standards. Except, of course, I can understand, she's tying it to the personal as well as the global. So I see that, comparison, but I also think it's a little awkward just to me personally. I feel like, stretching it back a little further would have given it a little bit more weight. Back to a time before I had formed, and then back to a time before I was born. But, if what she's, I think, alluding to is something that goes way back further than the 70s and 80s, something that we're talking about like I mean, I'm thinking about like Atlantis here when she's talking about ancient dreams. I'm thinking about like, when you get into sort of that esoteric kind of ancient prehistory stuff, that's all kind of, conspiracy and all debated and everything that we don't fully know the full picture of. But we get this idea that maybe at one time there was a much more utopian, egalitarian society that we were a part of, and somehow that all fell apart. Somehow the patriarchy, the Romans, whatever, they started to take control. And, we had the formations of a lot of the world religions of today, and things started to backslide. That's sort of the vein that I think she's going for when she talks about ancient dreams in a modern land, the modern land being predominantly the, social media landscape that we live in today. Because you could also talk about, we live in still a very ancient land. The land is ancient. We're sort of more modern compared to the land. This earth is very ancient. So you could almost say modern dreams in an ancient land, because the dreams of today can be viewed as quite modern compared to the earth that we inhabit. But I see what she's doing. You can flip it either way, and it creates an interesting sentiment for an album title. And I did really like that title. You don't have to be like everybody else. You don't have to fit into the norm. You are not here to conform. My high school self needed to hear these words. I am here to take a look inside myself, recognize that I could be the eye of the storm. I am not my body, not my mind, or my brain, not my thoughts or feelings. I am not my DNA. Some people would disagree with you on that, but I definitely do agree that we are more than our collective biological grouping of cells here. I am the observer. I'm a witness of life. I live in the space between the stars and the sky. So we're going super lofty and esoteric on our opener here. And I 100% kind of expected that. I mean, when again, you have an album title that's so open ended, like what she put here, that's so macrocosmic, it's so all encompassing, and leaving you to imagine spaces beyond what we can imagine today, it's definitely fitting for her to, open us up as wide a lens as we possibly can. And through the next few songs, she starts to shrink that lens. Although they're not most memorable melody, I think that the, again, somewhat throwback, almost very, like again, Family Jewels sounding instrumentation that she backs this with, I think gives it, like I said, that like youthful punk energy that gives a very sort of earnest call to action. Again, reminds me a little bit of, channeling Björk and songs like Alarm Call. I definitely feel like Marina's taking some inspiration off of that. It also gives me a bit of that Earth Intruders. If again, Björk fans will know what I'm talking about, like, a stomping sort of marching beat that can kind of rhythmically be synced up to a parade. That sort of energy is very fitting for a song that is so egalitarian and so kind of call to arms. On track 2, Venus Flytrap, we have some really interesting, bass guitar-like notes. We got some really interesting production going on for a track that, again, I wish was taking off a little more than it did melodically. Whatever you give life, you will get back. Why be a wallflower? Why be a wallflower when you can be a Venus flytrap? Although does not rhyme, is a quite poignant statement to make. Speaking to women specifically, I never quite fit into that Hollywood thing. I didn't play that game for the money or the fame. I did it my way, baby. Nothing in this world could change me. So, I mean, having integrity is so important when, the pitfalls of fame and the trappings of it, kind of the glossiness of it is all around you. I mean, Marina's tread this territory before. So in some ways, I don't find this song quite as revolutionary as I would like it to be, but that's because Marina has always had her hand on the pulse when it comes to talking about a women's role in, pop culture. I think she's always been kind of focused on that. That's sort of like her thesis statement in some ways for her music. And making sure that women know that they shouldn't be, walked all over by men, that they can be fiery and that they, don't have to be pretty all the time and satisfy the male gaze. Again, why not be a Venus flytrap, the most deadly flower, right? The carnivorous flower. I do love in the music video how she plays on the Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer movie logo by putting herself, Marina Presents. I mean, that was just really clever to me. Very Electra Heart in terms of the theming in the music video. She's playing this role of, this, Hollywood model type girl who's being her own boss. I mean, I think it would have fit beautifully on Electra Heart. Really would have. This song harkens straight to that. But it's not my favorite out of the singles. Okay, Man's World. my track review of it, I was a little underwhelmed by it, but I hate to be honest with you, listening to the whole record, this might be my favorite song on the album. And that shows that maybe I'm giving this album somewhat not quite the dues it deserves, but I'm just not really feeling a lot of the other songs in the same way melodically. Maybe it's just because I've had more time with this one. But this is the one song that I feel like has a melody that stands out from so many of the others. Again, especially if we're talking at the latter half of this record. The singles, again, I think they do stand out. I think the first four tracks on this album do a pretty good job of sounding different from one another, Man's World being no exception. Jennifer DeSilvio is one of the producers on this one, so I like that she's working with some women on these tracks instead of the traditional, the men that we see a lot of times in these production notes. So I've talked about this one. I mean, I love the lyrics, like mentioning a boucher cherub. I love the clever comparisons and the pointing out the hypocrisies of, homophobic autocrats with, Marilyn Monroe. Nature's dying, nobody's keeping score. I don't want to live in a man's world anymore. What else can I say? The music video is affirmatively beautiful, celebrating femininity, not just like biological womanhood, but femininity in the representation she has with the people she is featuring in that video. And I think it's just the perfect statement song for, queer identity and feminine identity in today's world. And so my second favorite song on the record is the second single, Purge the Poison, which I have, again, already made a video out of. The most up-tempo track, the song that feels the most garage band, like she really got the band together and was just riffing on the guitar, spitting some hard truths. All my friends are witches and we live in Hollywood. Mystical bitches making our own sisterhood. Lana Del Rey has come to the chat, I guess. While society is falling, we are quietly reforming, protecting the planet, healing our own damage. I went through the lyrics in that video and it just pulls together all of these things in society today that point to the fact that we as a society need to overthrow the government. I mean, she says women make up a quarter of it, and the revolution will not be televised. It's not going to necessarily, it's going to be nonviolent, but we need to purge the poison. So the best way we can do that is, through small acts of activism, kind of coming together, grassroots, doing what we can to collectively push the needle in a different direction. And over time, watch the dominoes fall. So, the newer tracks. Highly Emotional People, track 5. Life is a game that the universe plays. We are the pieces in a puzzle called fate. Life takes its time in its own fashion. Emotions unfold like a super bloom in action. The universe hangs like a necklace from God, jewels suspended in the cosmos. And it makes me believe this is how we're meant to be. Again, we're going very esoteric here, because we're just highly emotional people. And you don't need to hide. Sometimes it's hard to tell me how you feel. I never see you cry. Probably the softest and most delectable melody on this record, because it is so classic Marina when she gets those, treble clef piano notes mixed with her treble vocals. They just are meant to enchant you in the melody. And I think that the fact that this is the first song on the record that sounds like this, again, we have had songs that kind of tread this territory melodically before on other records, but because this record has this song as the first of these sort of emotional ballads, it's kind of fresh and it's welcoming after, the bombast of the first 4 tracks. And so I really get into the melody. I really get into the swell of it. I really am in with the sentiment, sensitive people. It can be really rough when we're trying to deal with someone who's hiding in all their emotions and we just want them to express it like we do, and learn that crying is okay. There's nothing wrong with that. People say men don't cry. It's so much easier to just lie till somebody takes their life. Emotions are a part of our design. Truer words can never have been spoken. I mean, men act all tough, but they really are dying inside just the same as anyone else. If they are not, properly processing their emotions, we are creatures of emotion. That's why we are so intelligent. It's a side effect of that, I guess you could argue, because you could argue that, smaller brained creatures on this earth are not so burdened by such senses of self and identity and emotion that, that we have because of the size of our brains. But it's a blessing and a curse. It's a blessing and a curse. And Marina's melody definitely doesn't point one way or the other. It's just stating the fact that we are emotional people, and the worst thing you can do is stifle that and pretend that you're a robot. As she sings in another song, I Am Not a Robot, this is the sister song, the softer, much more mellowed out sister companion song to that. Marina knows that she's not a robot, but she wants her partner to know that too. But the issue that I have is that we have a melody like this on several of the songs subsequently, and this is where the album starts to drag. The only other up-tempo real song we have on this record is New America. This song has grown on me. I gotta be honest, the first time I listened to it, I was pretty cheesed out. I was like, America, America. I was like, you're just gonna take that and make this sort of very Marina-esque melody out of it, that I feel like I've heard before. It's like recycled from other songs. And on top of that, you're sort of just repeating America over and over again. Besides the chorus being somewhat repetitive, I mean, she's spitting hard truths in the verses about the new America. I mean, she's really going at the States here. Now, I do find it quite interesting. Marina is British. And she's very right that the United States is one of the, pretty bad offenders of today's world in terms of, the environment and egalitarianism and, gun violence. She's touching on all of these, gender equality. America, you can't bury the truth. It's time to pay your dues. Reparations, girls calling for reparations. Effed with the food chain, effed with the farming too, and now our food don't taste like it's meant to do. She didn't need to put the do there because I don't really think that that's proper English to say like it's meant to do. You can just say like it's meant to. But I don't know, that's just a nitpicking thing. I might be wrong on that, correct me. It just comes off a little awkward to me. Because they've got blood on their hands. They stole all the land. Well, you might want to be looking also that side of the pond as well, because as last I checked, the British Empire was the king of stealing land back in the day. So it's not just America that's doing this. I mean, again, America's a perfect example of it. But I do feel like in some ways, I mean, I know she wanted to just focus, and maybe because she's spending more time in America than she is in Britain, and she's trying to like kind of fit it into that narrative of Hollywood and everything. But I definitely think that this song would have more weight to it if she was calling out colonialism everywhere, if she was calling out sexism in Europe as well, racism in Europe. I mean, even in Asia and other places too, it's not just a specific American problem. I mean, as much as we are the poster childs for doing it badly, I mean, every day you read the news about other countries, predominantly European countries, but unfortunately countries in other parts of the world as well, where we see these cycles of, mistreatment of the land, mistreatment of peoples, colonialism, the effects of it. It's a global issue, and it's affecting like a huge amount of this population is suffering from it, particularly in third world countries, but also just in general. We are a shared planet. We all screw this planet up. We are all going to feel the effects of it. So I do kind of wish she broadened it up to be just a little bit more about, instead of just America, maybe if she talked about, white people, like white straight men or something in power. She could make a real bell hooks anti-white supremacist capitalist patriarchy anthem. But covering it up by just talking about America I understand why she chose that route, because America is really not a good look right now. It's really not. But neither are a lot of other countries in this world right now. Pandoras Box. See, this song is just so melodically forgettable to me. I'm having a really hard time, no matter how many times I listen to it. I can't remember the melody of it, and that's not a good sign. We've got some orchestration coming in. It's just not an interesting production. It's just not an interesting composition. So I have a hard time even really finding myself grabbing the lyrics. Very interpersonal on this track, talking about, I didn't understand the can of worms or the Pandora's box of depravity that could be opened when I got to know you. I think she had, unfortunately, a rather tumultuous ex relationship in more recent times. I haven't been really following her romance life, but I think that's what she's alluding to. You opened up Pandora's box. You don't know what you just unlocked. I lose all control, let go of my darkest thoughts, because I see the truth when we were stacked against the odds. And I pray that hope's not lost. So I hope this didn't burn me and turn me into a horrible, bitter person, because that's what you are, and I'm not going to perpetuate this cycle. That's what I'm getting from it. Again, it's just not the strongest of melodies. I'm just finding myself kind of forgetting the songs on, just not really being grabbed by anything here. I hate to say it, But then I Love You, But I Love Me More, which picks up the same sentiment of sort of like kind of post breakup. The introduction of the guitars, the energy, the angst of this song, the melody, it grabs my ear's attention again, which is very welcome at this point in the record. The melody sort of reminds me of her song Solitaire. I just feel like, I know she's not doing it on purpose. I don't think she is. But there are these compositions just sort of recycling through her music. And other artists do it too. I don't know why I'm picking on Marina so much for it. Is it just something it's jumping out to me more than it does for other artists? I'm not sure. But it's a great melody. It's a great melody, so I'm not gonna knock it. It's different enough, but I do see the comparison. And once again, I don't wanna act as though, like, it's hard because for me personally, Fruit is Marina's best album. It's, like, the only album of hers with no skips for me. It's just 12 songs, immaculately produced, total vibe, total package, very cohesive, tells a story. Each song feels individual and unique, but all a part of a whole. I love the album cover, the theming. I just can't get enough of that record. And I think it's quintessential Marina at her strongest when she's composing melodies and blending, the different kinds of instrumentals that she uses. I feel like every other album is a bit redundant of that. There's glimmers of that, but then it feels like it's just a knockoff. It's a tricky situation for her, and it's a tricky situation for any artist who, in someone's opinion has the best album and then they follow it up with something hard to compare. Best part is when we get that guitar coming in, the electric guitar kind of riffing the melody in the post bridge. I mean, that's something that I think really sails really wonderfully. And again, in a post breakup situation, I'm all here for the lyrics. Pretty simplistic, but don't come knocking back on my door because I'm moving on to better things. I realized that you were somewhat of a leech on me. You were very toxic, and I did love you, but at the end of the day, I still care a lot more about my own growth and progress and happiness than yours. If you're clearly not, putting in that effort, then I'm not going to give it to you. So, a very important statement for people to remember. They don't want to be if you don't want to be a doormat for someone else in the process of falling in love and falling out of it. The penultimate ballad, Flowers, the most stripped back song on the record, has actually grown on me somewhat. It's a very simple song. Even when I saw the title, I was like, Flowers, okay. Like, calling a ballad Flowers is like kind of elementary school to me in terms of lyricism. I hate saying that. I don't know why. Marina's songwriting is not always the most abstract, but that being said, there's not so much layering around her vocals, so we really get to hear, think of her ballad Happy off of Fruit. And we actually didn't get a song like this on Love and Fear, where her voice was not layered, and we really just got the pure vocal from her. And I actually appreciate that she really stripped things back for a moment here because I missed that. I loved having that on Happy, and none of her other albums really have that. Marina, simplistically just pining about being back at a relationship and kind of using flowers as symbol of like an olive branch that she realized at the end of the relationship, she really kind of, I know it sounds silly to say if you just bought me flowers, maybe I would have stayed because it's like, well, what do flowers really symbolize? But it's twofold. I think she's on the deeper aspect of it, really realizing that those gestures mean a lot over time. And this guy obviously didn't put those symbolic gestures out very often. And I guess gifts are a part of her love language, it looks like, for Marina. She probably really enjoys those little gifts, even if they sometimes feel a little superficial. It's the thought behind it. But she also realized, kind of selfishly, that she just loves gardening and she loves flower arranging. She talks about how she kind of took that up in the pandemic. And post breakup, she just found herself. I mean, I even remember seeing on her Instagram, she actually was sort of displaying some floral arrangements that she had done in some vases and stuff. So it was a hobby she took up and obviously inspired this ballad. We had the thorns and the leaves, but the buds, they never bloomed. Favorite lyric, perhaps on this entire record. Again, some of the lyricism is very kind of simplistic around, we had colors bold and bright in a home that's filled with love and hope and life that just feels right. I will be honest, it's a little elementary school in terms of songwriting for me lyrically, but at the same time, I forgive it for Marina because half of it's about the melody. All the happiness you lost. Like the vocal dynamic she does on that, I think, is what sells the song for me. It's the piece de resistance of the melodic composition of this track. It's what I remember the most, and I think if it were missing, it would really suffer for it. The final track, Goodbye. Now, this might actually be my least favorite song on the record. I said Pandora's Box. It's a tie between Pandora's Box and Goodbye. These two songs, I am just not interested in the melodic structure of at all. And in fact, when we have that moment in the chorus where, we have this continual swell, this ambiance, and then it's abruptly stopped. Obviously, it was jarring on first listen because you don't expect it. And even when you get used to it, obviously it'll grow on you a little bit, but it's just not a decision that I would have made. Now, at the same time, I do applaud her for making something a little riskier and experimental because somewhat this album is, in the latter section, kind of losing that a little bit. So I have to remember that like these songs are kind of organic in that way. And so I actually do appreciate that she decided to take that left turn with the pacing of the song. But I just feel it's a little out of place because I understand she's wanting to put a full hard stop there, like a period, like talk about doing a melodic equivalent of a period. But I feel like it actually just is abrupt for the only sake of being abrupt and edgy. That's the only reason it's there. It doesn't actually add a whole lot of oomph to the actual theme of the song for me. I know that might be sounding a little harsh, but I feel like you can get across the idea of goodbye in a much more sort of emotional way rather than like literally like stopping the song when you say it. But again, it's a stylistic choice that I don't fault her for. It's just I'm wanting something a little more grandiose melodically. I'm wanting something that has a little bit more atmosphere in the production and maybe like takes you on a bit more of a tear jerking kind of stratospheric kind of place. I don't know how to explain it, but I just feel as though this song lacks anything that's anywhere kind of anything kind of haunting or ephemeral about it because it's just that piano chord kind of just repeating in the background. But yeah, her vocal layering, it's always going to sound really good. It's always going to sound really good. Again, it's just not something that's special to me. I hate saying that, but I'm just not feeling it. The line that, of course, really sticks out is I've been a mother to everyone else, to every mother effer except myself, and I don't even have kids. I mean, that line woke me up. It woke me up from the sort of platitudes of ending of a relationship that most of the lyrics on this song just meditate upon, which in some ways are not really anything special. I hate saying it, but I think that one line is just like, okay, Marina, spitting truths, and really kind of not holding back. And I like to see that. And I kind of wish we saw even more of that on this record. And those are my closing thoughts on it. Again, I'm having a hard time being like super clear about what I don't like about this record because I know I've seen some people say it's her best yet. People are really, rallying behind it. I do think it could have benefited from one or two more songs. I just feel like it feels a little incomplete. I feel like we needed like one more sort of up-tempo song similar to like Purge the Poison at the latter end of this record. I mean, I guess I Love You, but I Love Me More sort of satisfies that. But I liked how on Fruit, for example, again, not to use that record, it was all balanced in terms of, she put Savages at the end of the record and not like completely winging the back half with ballads. She actually put a ballad at the beginning. And then like it was an interesting order of things. And this record, it's too up tempo at the beginning and then too down tempo and minimalistic and samey at the end. And I don't think that helps the story arc of, well, at least for me, the listening experience, and kind of drags. It's a short album, and ironically, I get bored with it, and I wish it was longer, which is kind of weird, but I don't know how to explain it. I guess I have to remember that like Marina's an artist I love, but she's not got a lot of like my absolute favorite songs of all time in her discography. So, I will always respect and love what Marina does, but I'm not always going to be like listening to her on repeat. She's, an artist I'm always going to be interested in seeing what incarnation she is going to be channeling. But I do think that there could have been a little bit more to this record. And so I was thinking as I was sitting down, I was like, how am I going to express this without just being like kind of like, oh, he just doesn't like it, but he's not giving good reasons why. Because maybe it's just a taste thing. At the end of the day, it's just a taste thing. A lot of these melodies I've heard before, and I think I've heard more, hauntingly on previous records of hers. And so it's just all a little derivative to me. It's all a little derivative to me. Some of them are growing on me. Like Flowers, I didn't like Flowers or New America on first listen, and they've grown on me a little bit. So That's gonna happen, but I think my least favorites would definitely be Pandora's Box and Goodbye. I think they're the weakest songs on the record, particularly Pandora's Box, because, you know, at least Goodbye does have something memorable about it, even if I'm not a big fan of the choice she made with that hard stop. But the one thing I do wanna just add to this is that I know I see a lot of people saying this album is probably too focused on social commentary, that they're a little tired of that, it's too political. That is not my issue whatsoever with Marina and the direction she's going. You know, I love that she is taking things in that route, and I want to see more of that. I think social commentary in pop music is the best kind of pop music, especially if you can deftly weave the interpersonal with the extrapersonal. Anyway, what are your thoughts on this record? I hope I, you know, didn't upset any Marina fans here. You can check out again my other reviews. I mean, Love and Fear has a big record, so there were a lot of songs I loved, but there were also a lot of songs I wasn't as crazy about. So it kind of came down to about a 10-song album for me that I was songs that I liked, and then I kind of skipped the others. So the problem with this record is that there's only 10 songs, and when you take out a couple that you don't like, it's too short. It's just not quite enough. So I guess, yeah, again, it would have been nice just seeing a few more tracks, but you know, she was quick with this turnaround, and maybe she will be with the next one. I don't know. I don't want her to rush things though. You know how I feel about that. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Please give it a like if you did, and subscribe if you are new here for more Marina content when she puts out new stuff and other artists that I talk about. Let me know in the comments. Again, it's just my opinion. What are your thoughts on the record? And what I have to say about it? I'm sure people disagree, and that's totally fine. My thoughts will evolve too. I'll see you all in my next video. I hope you all have a wonderful, blessed day. Peace, love, and light. Bye.